my own relationship to the theme of belonging is vast. It's really important when we're looking at belonging to see where we're at right now, because belonging has such a huge impact on our relationship to identity. And that identity is often in life something that we assume. So many labels fly around, and often, particularly when we're young people and growing up, we fall into a role. We fall into roles, don't we? You know, we fall into the listener or the rebel, or trauma impacts the way that we respond, and we may be very quiet or subdued or, anything from one extreme to the other, right? And that sometimes we believe the stories we tell ourselves in terms of how we are meant to behave and how we're meant to be. And sometimes we don't question what we've been told in terms of how we're meant to behave and meant to be. And as we have access to life and we are being educated, and I say that kind of in a very loose sense of the word because it's not necessarily for our own good, actually. But when we're being, if we're part of a system, then we embody to a certain extent, the values of that system until we come to a point where we begin to question what we're being told. And if we are able to, once we begin to get a sense that perhaps we need to question all the time, and some people do it from birth, which is magical and wonderful. But whatever stage you begin to question, it's good, right? And that suddenly it's like, well, hang on a minute, does all of this apply to me? Is all of this relevant to me? Is it actually doing me any good? Is it nourishing me? Is it supporting me? Is it helping me? Is it encouraging me to grow? So all of those things, are essential to our identity. And then looking at where we fit, okay, who our tribe is. And that it's not about conforming. It's not about, right, if I start behaving like this and start doing this and start, then it'll be fine because I'll be accepted. Okay. Being accepted into a tribe is not about changing your behavior, really. It's about embodying what really feels right in your heart and connecting to the other pieces in the mandala and becoming stronger as a result of that, becoming greater, becoming fuller, becoming integrated in a very expansive way. Okay. Having said that, in terms from a kind of more like sociological or anthropological perspective, it's also about, how we behave and what we look like and all of those things as well. So, you can identify and be identified through the way that we choose to express ourselves, and that includes our appearance as well, right? And looking at how all of this impacts on the life we live and the choices we make. Because coming back to a more emotional perspective on this, the decisions we make are really very often based not only on the circumstances we find ourselves, but on what we believe the outcome, the inevitable outcome to be, right? And that if we are thinking in a limiting way for whatever reason, and I'm saying this without judgment, I'm saying this from a lifetime of observing myself, and also from 25 years of working with people very closely, that we can believe that there is only one way, that there is only one road, one avenue, and sometimes this is influenced by what I call a legacy, and that this relationship we have to what we assume life to be can greatly affect the choices that we make in terms of where we feel we're accepted and where we feel we belong. And so belonging for me is a journey of, and this is not true for everyone, I'm very aware of that, but from my standpoint and my sharing and my truth, is the belonging for me is first of all the unpicking of conditioning, the undoing, the unhooking of the stories that we have believed to be true about ourselves and the ones that we have been told we should assume. And also work through trauma, and not only personal trauma, but inherited ancestral trauma. And anybody who has been an immigrant or a refugee or living however many generations on, you know, it's a very personal thing. But living in a country where originally your people weren't born there, didn't originate from, so really beginning to identify or find oneself in a new place, and the legacy that goes with that identity, the identity of people who were originally misplaced people, or uprooted people, or slavery, and the stories that we have around that. So coming into a more personal perspective on this, as a Latin American woman immigrant coming to the UK as a child with very few possessions in a suitcase, and the history behind the reasons as to why, and the stepping into a culture where there's also, following me, a whole history and legacy of Latin American people, migrants throughout the world, and what happens when you're an immigrant or a refugee. Not only the build up to that situation, but what actually happens when you get there. You know, if you're fortunate enough to arrive at a place where you're going to have a roof over your head and a chance to begin again. I mean, I can't begin to express all of the things that go with that are so deep in terms of how much one has to work through in terms of self-worth, self-esteem, and a sense of belonging in one's world, a new world, in one's skin. And this is before you look at discrimination and racism and, language barriers and, poverty and all of those things, okay? All of that is in the mix. So when you're working through a legacy, what you're doing is you're addressing the issues, and you're not necessarily addressing them one by one, and they're not necessarily conscious either, but they are there. And if you are, and also all sorts of things, gosh, it's like total, so much to say, and trying to kind of condense it. There are Latin American people, young people, now older possibly, who don't speak Spanish, or other, or whatever, Brazilian Portuguese, or, who don't speak it. Their parents spoke it, and then it kind of got, so, there's that identity of, well, yeah, you're still who you identify as. You're still, it doesn't make you any less Latino or Latina. Yeah, it doesn't make you any less. And also, but however, there is you have to work extra hard to connect, because you are no longer in that place that your parents were born or that you were originally born. And that connection to roots is really powerful. However, having said that, you also embrace the identity that you really want. That is, you also embrace who you are becoming, because I kind of think it's best to use myself an example here, that being Chilean is not it for me, full stop. And I don't expect that of, my children. I am a Latina-Brit now. I speak English far better than I speak Spanish, although Spanish is there. It is my mother tongue. It is the first language that I spoke. And I have, strong memories of living in Chile. At the same time, my identity is my own. So my power, my empowerment, and my truth is in my unique experience and identity. And that is true for everybody if they arrive at a place where they are exploring a safe place of nourishment and nurturing, where they can explore the identity they want. I also come across people who are very determined to keep one identity, and also that for their children. But the thing about that is that, if you have kids born somewhere other than your original country of birth, or the country that you identify with, they're going to have their own identity. So subsequently, my children, have their own identity, and it is not my identity. And what's wonderful about that for them is that they have a true sense of belonging, whereas I've really had to work at that. I've had to work at being at ease with where I've landed in my life. and that's been a very conscious thing. It doesn't mean I'm disempowered, but I had to have a lot of help, a lot of therapy to get me to this point. And also as a woman. So the sense of belonging now, for me, the shift now is embracing my identity as a British Latino woman of color who is in menopause, who is immersed in shamanism, shamanic practice, and empowerment, sharing leadership with other women. And that for me, belonging in any place is about, because I've explained my history to you, you would have a better idea now of why I'm saying this so clearly, is that belonging is a very individual thing, and that it transcends how you began your life. And the labels that people or society or family or oneself put down, all the roles we played as, listener, victim, bully, whatever. Because we're capable, of all sorts of things growing up, aren't we? But also that, the role of, hard worker, or the role of doormat, or the role of carer, or, the stereotypical feminine roles, that we always have to, look after everybody, and it's an assumed role. Sometimes we just want to be wild, and that is amazing. And that, looking at one's identity is about having a choice, a conscious choice that we may need help to work towards, somebody to facilitate this for us. And that there comes a point in which you, like fruit on a tree, you are ripe and ready to land, ripe and ready to begin. Okay. And that this moment of acknowledgement is so powerful in terms of what you think, feel, sense, embody, acknowledge, that it is really all about self-validation, ultimately. That being part of a tribe is also about acknowledging who your tribe is, rather than, waiting for that tribe to say you're good enough, And sometimes that tribe can consist of a whole lot of people who just feel exactly like you. They are, in some ways, partly nomadic, in some ways have transformed their identities many times, changed through life. And women in midlife identify each other in this way. Okay. So where I am right now, I'm looking at how we look at each other and smile. We are, looking at life in a very different way. It is definitely a time in life when you begin to drop the pretense, when you really haven't got time for it, it's too tiring. And you are honing your wisdom. You're like, my goodness, I've been alive for decades. I've been through a lot. I am loving myself. I am here for myself. And I am expressing myself boldly, loudly. and that you recognize, you look across a room or, you know, down a street or wherever it is you are, and you connect and see that soul that is feeling the same. And it is a tribe. It is a tribal connection, okay, spiritual connection. And that this creativity that you actually begin to acknowledge could be that some people acknowledge it all their lives, and that's wonderful too. But that there's something very special happens in menopause, which is actually about embodying your creativity at a very different level. You are really trying out new things for yourself because they feel good to do, and they're becoming part of your identity and how you choose to identify yourself to the world and to yourself. That you are picking out the bits that you want to carry forward in the journey, and coming clean with a few about a few things in oneself, working through the discomfort, and it's quite confrontational too, and a huge level of empowerment, and days when you just want to hide because you are sort of really chrysalis state. You haven't birthed yourself yet. And that is why I've gone through a huge career of being a well-being expert, being a shamanic healer, homeopath, looking after women's health and healing for a long time. And have arrived at this point where I now help to facilitate and teach ceremony so that others can honor their processes, their transformations, because this is big. These rites of passage are enormous. And therefore, for me, belonging is about acknowledgement of who we are, looking at deep within the legacy of our souls, of our lives, and also reaching forward to what we want to hold dear and closest to our hearts. And really to begin to live and walk that path that brings us the greatest joy, the most amount of love, and the greatest sharing with ourselves, with the earth, with the environment, so that life becomes immersive and life becomes conscious and of the moment. And that belonging in this very sacred land, wherever it is that you are, the sacred land I identify with now, far away from where I was born, is England, the UK, and, well, Great Britain, really, United Kingdom, kind of, everywhere is so beautiful. And that is where I feel like, that is the food I eat. It's got the earth that where it is grown. It is, it is open and generous and beautiful. The landscapes are, and it is a place where I now call home. But the home is really within my own ability to be comfortable in my own skin and my own stages of change and my own ability to walk my truth and my path. And all of those things are essential to the way that I belong.